All right, let's get started. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar series. This month we are doing a webinar on SQF Edition 8. And our guest speaker today is Kim Sabatka, Director of Business Development with ASI Food Safety. Go to the next slide. Just a few things about Kim. She's a registered safe quality food system implementation professional, and she's successfully guided over 230 facilities to SQF certification. And as mentioned before, she's the Director of Business Development for ASI Foods in St. Louis, Missouri, but she's currently in Vegas enjoying the sunshine. And she's one of our best MEP Center third-party providers in this area. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Maureen. As she stated, I'm Kim with ASI Food Safety, and I'm attending a boot camp out here in Las Vegas, but wanted to share with you an overview of SQF Edition 8.0. So our learning objectives for this slideshow is understanding the Global Food Safety Initiative and the scheme owners audit programs, understanding specifically SQF Audit Edition 8.0, what the role of your certification body is, how to prepare for an SQF audit, and understanding the GFSI and SQF vocabulary. So there are three types of audits. There is a first-party audit, and that is when you audit yourself. It's an internal audit program, and it's performed by an employee of your organization. SQF 8.0 does require that you conduct internal audits of your system. The next type is a second-party audit, and this is an external audit person. Usually it's your suppliers who come in and do audits to their specifications, and it's typically done by your suppliers. And then there's the third-party audit, which is what ASI provides and which SQF 8.0 falls under. It's an external audit performed by an independent organization, and the SQF and GFSI audits are all third-party audits. And under the GFSI banner, there's SQF, BRC, ISO 22000, but we're going to talk today about SQF 8.0. So when you get a third-party accredited audit, as I stated, it's done by an external audit body. It's performed by an accredited certification body, by an auditor who's got competency in your food sector category, and there's an approved audit template, and SQF 8.0 changed significantly January 2nd. So SQF, as I stated, stands for Safe Quality Food, and it is designed to manage the risk in your process. SQF is a GFSI recognized audit scheme. It's a process and product certification, and it is based on Codex HACCP. Now, January 2nd, 2018, SQF restructured their audit program, and now we've got SQF Food Safety Fundamentals, the SQF Food Safety Code, which covers an independent code for food manufacturing, storage and distribution, packaging, primary production, and food retail, and last, the SQF Quality Code, which is no longer a standalone code. It is an add-on to one of the food safety codes. An overview of SQF is it does cover the entire food supply chain. It's owned by the Food Marketing Institute, which is a U.S. company. The SQF code is designed to certify the supplier. The food safety management system complies with international and domestic food safety regulations, and as stated, it does cover the whole food supply chain from farm to fork. Under the SQF 8.0, everybody has system elements, which is mandatory for all SQF facilities, and then a corresponding module somewhere between 3 and 15 based on your food sector specific category. The objectives of an SQF audit are to determine conformity and nonconformity, to determine the effectiveness of your food safety management system and that it's sustainable and also allows for continuous improvement. It provides you as an SQF facility an opportunity to improve over time, and they have now added some requirements that helps you meet regulatory requirements. An SQF audit permits the listing of you as a supplier to be registered in a global database, the SQF ReposiTrak system, and you must register in the SQF ReposiTrak system in order to go through one of these audits. Okay, so here is a brief overview. Each level standard builds on the next level. So you've got your food safety fundamentals, which used to be called SQF level 1. You've got the food safety code, which is your HACCP methodology that's used in conjunction with the food safety fundamentals. And then, as I stated, the food quality code is now an add-on, and you must get certified to the food safety code either prior to or at the same time of the food quality. So food safety fundamentals, former 7.2 level 1, is for new and developing suppliers. They use fundamental food safety controls. It shows under the SQF food safety fundamentals your knowledge of appropriate regulations that apply to you. It demonstrates the compliance to those regulations, and it is the application of the fundamental food safety controls. The food safety code, and this is the most important one and where probably 95% of clients go to the SQF food safety code. This is formally known as SQF level 2. It includes all of the food safety fundamentals, but it identifies hazards to food safety through the hazard analysis or HACCP program. It identifies interventions to mitigate and reduce or eliminate the risk or reduce it to acceptable levels. And you must use HACCP methods during the assessment. The food quality code includes all of your food safety fundamentals and the food safety code. As I stated, it's an add-on. It identifies food quality risks. It establishes the process to eliminate, reduce, or prevent them from occurring, and it also uses the HACCP methodology to identify and control the quality hazards. So the SQF certification process is the same for everybody. You've got to learn about the code, and they've got on here senior management as part of step 1. It is a requirement that you have management commitment in order to go through one of the SQF code. The next step is you're going to designate an SQF practitioner, and oftentimes this is your HACCP coordinator because a lot of the documentation is the same. You define the scope of the audit, like manufacturing peanut butter bars or manufacturing potato chips, and these, whatever your process and scope is, will determine what food sector categories and applicable modules are going to apply. The next step is going to be to register in the SQF database ReposiTrak. Again, it's a requirement for everybody, and there is a fee for that SQF bases based on your annual sales. Step 5 is to select the certification level, the food safety fundamentals, which is not one of the Global Food Safety Initiative benchmark schemes. That starts at the food safety code, and then the decision whether to add the food quality code to that as well. Step 6 is to document and implement your SQF system. When you partner up with a certification body, they are able to provide you with a self-assessment checklist. So once you document and implement your system, you can self-assess yourself, or you can wait until a little bit further in the process. And step 7 is selecting your certification body, and there's a list of 31 accredited certification bodies for SQF in the United States. And step 8 is to have a pre-assessment audit done, and that's basically a mock SQF audit, but it's not reported to anybody outside of your organization or SQFI. So the supplier registration on the SQFI database, you must maintain registration at all times. The fee, as I stated, is based on your gross annual sales and will be somewhere between 100 to 600 per year per location. There is an annual renewal and it's based on your initial registration date. So if you register April 1st, it's going to be April 1st every year. It's not going to be the same date as your certification because you must register prior to your audit taking place, because that's how you, your auditor, and your certification body all communicate. It's all done through that system. And failure to maintain active registration will result in the suspension of your certificate by SQFI. Okay, selecting a certification body. So the supplier has to have a contract in place with an accredited certification body that outlines the audit that's going to be conducted and the certification services that are to be provided. So the scope of the audit, the manufacturing of peanut butter cookies, again, it will determine your food sector category and your applicable modules. The length of the audit and, the length to conduct and finalize the audit. So the man days will be determined in that agreement, and it's based on size of facility, number of employees, and number of HACCP programs. Time to write the report is going to be included in that contract, and any fee structures by that certification body needs to be included in that agreement. Okay, let's talk about the auditor cycle. Maureen, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, my apologies. I had a message pop up. So the auditor cycle is every 3 years, and that includes any pre-assessment document review, facility audit, and or surveillance audit. So the way that the SQF determines it is years 1, 2, and 3, you can use the same audit, but he can theoretically be in there a total of about 8 times because they go by the entire certification cycle and any activity that's included in that time. So year 4 of your certification, you'll have a different SQF audit, and that is mandated by SQFI. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the SQF practitioner, because this is an important piece of SQF. Not only is their management commitment a requirement, it's also required that every facility have an SQF practitioner designated. It's in the SQF Food Safety Code under 2.1.2.4 and 2125. The designation of the practitioner is a requirement, and it's a person who has the authority to oversee the SQF system. They need to hold a position of responsibility, and that doesn't mean a manager. It means somebody who's able to make decisions when it comes to your SQF system. It needs to be a full-time employee, and every facility that's certified needs to have at least one plus a backup, and it's per site. So if you have multiple locations, each facility has to have a designated practitioner. A requirement of the practitioner is that they have completed a HACCP certification training course and actually have a certificate. And then, of course, SQF practitioner training is recommended, but the requirement for the practitioner is that they have knowledge about the code, not that they go through the formal training. The only formal training that they must have is HACCP. Okay, they must be knowledgeable of the SQF code and able to implement and maintain the HACCP program for that facility. They're responsible for the implementation and maintaining of the food safety plan, which is also HACCP, and the food management system. You communicate your SQF code concerns to the appropriate personnel within your organization, and that's what we mean by a person of responsibility. When that practitioner speaks to upper management needs to understand that there may or may not be an issue with the SQF code when it's raised by the practitioner. The practitioner is required to conduct and oversee the internal audit process. Every year, you're required to do an internal audit of your entire SQF system outside of your formal SQF audit. So the practitioner is the one that's responsible for that. And the practitioner will validate and verify the food safety requirements and food safety plans, at least on an annual basis. Okay, let's talk about how to define the scope. Um, every facility is going to fall under a specific food sector category, and manufacturing or packaging or distribution is going to define, number one, which code you're going to use, but that is going to stay with you through your contract, through your audit, and then through the public view on ReposiTrak. You need to include all of the products that you manufacture at your facility. There are very few exclusions allowed. So in other words, if you're making one product for, say, Sam's or Walmart, and then you have 14 other products, you can't exclude those. You need to include all of that into your SQF system. The defining the scope will include the processes that are actually done. And again, a scope might read processing of snack food and then list potato chips, pretzels, crackers, and that type of stuff, or manufacturing of packaging materials. So you will include within that scope your process. And not only does that state what you do, but it does determine your food sector category. The scope must be agreed upon between the CB and the supplier. Since this is a formal contract, it is up to the supplier to submit everything that they do, and then it's up to the CB to verify that it's accurate. So the contract can change up until it's fully signed and executed, and then once the audit begins, a scope cannot be changed. So it sounds like a fairly simple thing, but there are many times when an auditor will arrive at the facility to do one, and once he begins the audit, products can't be added. And you want to add all of those products because that's what shows up in that global database where you're going to appear once you're certified. The scope can be amended after the audit through a scope change process. Every CB scope change is a little bit different. With our particular CB, we do like a one-page contract amendment that just states, they've added products or that we missed them the first time around. So once the audit begins, it can't be changed, but after the audit's done, there is a process where you can change it. I've included a couple of scope examples just because it's such an important part of SQF 8.0. So it's always going to begin with manufacturing, packaging, storing of something. So depending on which code, that's going to depend what code applies to you. That's going to tell your CB that manufacturing, you're going to have the manufacturing code. If you start with, manufacturing of packaging material, it's going to fall into the packaging. So in this particular case, I've got the production, packaging, storing, and shipping of hard candy, soft candy, taffy, sugar sticks, and chocolate. So that would be a very thorough scope. Another one might be receiving and storing of raw materials for manufacturing, on-site storage, and distribution of aluminum cans. So this second example would be the manufacturing of food sector packaging material, food safety code. Okay, now we're going to delve a little bit into the SQF audit process. Your initial audit, you have the option of having that pre-assessment. The pre-assessment is optional. It's not mandatory. It's a mock SQF audit. It's conducted by a licensed SQF auditor. They're going to use the actual SQF audit module templates that are issued by SQF. It's created and managed by the certification body. Remember, the pre-assessment is not reported to SQF through the ReposiTrak system. It's kind of just a safety net prior to your initial certification. 99% of the time, the pre-assessment is going to be 2 days on-site with 1 day write-up off-site. It provides a benchmark for suppliers on your compliance to and understanding of the SQF standards. Now, during a pre-assessment, he's only going to identify nonconformities or conformances. So in other words, he's not going to give you the corrective action like would be done under your self-assessment or gap analysis. So he's only there to identify your compliance or non-compliance to the SQF requirements. Your initial certification audit. The initial certification is always going to be slightly different than your annual recertification audit. During your initial certification, you must undergo a document or desk audit. It's a requirement, and that's where they're going to go in and make sure that you have system elements and then the requirements for your corresponding module. Like for manufacturing of food, it's going to be module 11. So you'll have system elements in module 11. So he's going to make sure you have 2.1.1, 2.1.2, 11.1.1, 11.1.2. The desk audit is uploaded into the repository system. It can be done off-site if you have a electronic copy of your SQF system. It audits strictly that you've got the requirements. It's not going to look for supporting documentation. It confirms that the SQF practitioner has been designated by the facility and that you have a HACCP program and completed the hazard analysis that goes along with that. It conducts a risk assessment on your process. It confirms your appropriate scope and food sector categories. And the nice thing about the document review is it is not scored. So any nonconformity that is identified, because it has to be corrected prior to the facility audit, do not get deducted from your audit score. So you can have 13 nonconformances and you would not lose 13 points if they were all minors off of your final facility audit score, because they do require that you correct those. Now, once you undergo a desk audit or document audit or doc review, they're all called kind of the same thing. That is valid from 6 months from the last day of your audit. And this is important if you were missing major items within that, within the SQF code during the doc review. It allows you time to create those, get the documents in place, and start creating the supporting documentation that you're going to be required to show during the actual audit. Most facilities set up their facility audit about 30 days after the desk audit to keep that process going. Okay, once you have gone through your desk audit and you've closed out all of your nonconformities, you're ready for that facility audit. And again, that can be done from 30 days to 6 months after your doc review. The facility audit is always conducted on site. It is always announced unless you opt in for the new unannounced option with SQF. Right now, the requirement is once every 3 audit cycles, you undergo an unannounced audit. But you also have the option of opting in to unannounced and having that done unannounced every year. But I've not had any facilities since January 2nd that have opted for that, because you're going to be going through an unannounced audit every 3 audit cycles anyway. During the initial certification audit, the auditor is going to review the corrective actions that you submitted on the document audit to make sure that you've closed all those, you've created what you were missing, you've tweaked what was incorrect about what you did have. He's going to audit the entire facility, including areas that are excluded from the scope. So in other words, he's going to audit the entire facility, and you have to get written permission from SQF to exclude something, but he's still going to audit the excluded product if you do get approval. He's going to review records to determine continuous compliance with the SQF processes and that you're maintaining the documentation associated with that. He's going to assess the senior management commitment to the SQF audit scheme, and he's going to ensure corrective actions and improvements are implemented based on your own internal audit findings. So all of that's going to happen during your initial certification audit. Okay, now recertification audit. Recertification audits are conducted 1 year after the facility audit, the last day of your initial facility audit. So if your audit is April 23rd and 4th, your April 24th will be your annual recertification audit. Again, they're going to be announced except for one time every 3 years. So you'll be during your first recertification audit and second recertification audit, they will ask you if you want announced or unannounced. The certification body and auditor during your recertification audit is going to verify all of your products and the scope that it's still accurate and you haven't added or changed anything. The auditor is going to review implementation of corrective actions from your previous audit. It's going to include the review of records to ensure continuous compliance to the SQF standard. He's going to verify compliance to SQF processes, confirm management commitment, and review any process improvements you've made from the previous year. Okay, let's talk about the surveillance audit. The surveillance audit under 8.0 are now unannounced, and they're conducted 6 months after your audit, your initial audit, or your recertification audit if you score below an 85%. So you're still going to get certified, but you're going to have a review at the 6-month mark. And under 8.0, these are unannounced. But if your audit was April 24th, you count ahead 6 months, and then it's going to be 30 days plus or minus. So you really have a 60-day window of when your unannounced audit's going to take place. Surveillance audits are done if you get a C for complies and you don't get the E for good or G for excellent. So you still get certified, but you have to have this 6-month review. And under 8.0, it can change the score of your audit. So hopefully if you scored a C for comply, then you raise that score up to fall within the E or G, because that's the information that's going to be published on the website. He's going to verify that the CCPs are monitored and under control. He's going to confirm that the food safety plan is up to date. And during the surveillance audit, any new majors or minors that are identified must be corrected within 30 days. Okay, so here's the conformance levels. For every SQF requirement statement, they got rid of opportunities. You're either compliant, critical, major, or minor. And if you are compliant in something, then that means that you meet all of the requirements of that actual SQF element. So the objective evidence that the auditor is looking for is that you meet the code, that you're capable of maintaining compliance, that your SQF system is appropriate and effective, and it's designed to identify areas for improvement. And objective evidence that the auditor is looking for can be records that you've kept, employee interviews, or simply auditor observations during the audit. Okay, so yeah, that was just a random screen. I apologize for that. Now we're back to the nonconformances. So under SQF 8.0, minors have a 1-point deduction, majors have 10, and criticals are 50 points. So that's an automatic failure because you're going to lose 50. And a critical violation could be a live rodent or bird during the audit, or a major element that's missing out of one of the mandatory elements that are missing out of your SQF system. As I stated, the document review score does not count towards your facility audit score because all of those are corrected. Everybody starts at 100%, and then as you get minors, majors, and criticals, your score goes down from there. So your goal as an SQF certified facility is to get above an 85%, so 86 and above, and then you would be on a 12-month audit frequency. Okay, the SQF certificate, what does that mean? So the SQF certificate, when it is issued, is an assurance that a supplier's food safety plan have been implemented in accordance to HACCP methodology, and that it demonstrates the supplier's commitment to produce safe quality food, to comply with the SQF code, and to comply with applicable food legislation. So this is the document, implement, and record part. In SQF system, you have to say what you do what you say, and then document it. And it's just that simple. You document an SQF system by aligning with system elements and appropriate modules. You implement the system, and then you document you document, nonconformities, you demonstrate continuous improvement, and you demonstrate compliance to your SQF system and record it. So here's do what you say what you do, and document it. Okay, now let's talk about system elements. Under 7.2, this used to be called Module 2. Now it's called System Elements under Edition 8.0. It is mandatory for all suppliers, regardless of if you manufacture, package, distribute, retail, or primary producers. So system elements apply to everybody. Within those system elements, there are some requirements that are mandatory, and those are marked mandatory, which means that you have to have those as part of your system. The system elements are the core elements of the SQF code. It's a foundation of your SQF system. It's based on risk assessment, and it's based on your specific risk assessment, and it requires the use of HACCP processes to support that system. So what are system elements under the Food Safety Code? It's your food safety plan. It includes all of your food safety fundamentals. It requires you to conduct a food safety hazard analysis for each product or process. You're trying to eliminate hazards to acceptable levels, and you must use HACCP methodology. The quality code is a food quality plan that's added onto your food safety code. It includes all of the fundamentals, all of the food safety code. It also uses HACCP to identify and assess food quality hazards. And under 8.0, this is an add-on. So you either have to go through a food safety code audit or do it simultaneously. You can't undergo just the quality audit. So a certification body certifies your SQF system. So when a certification body conducts an audit, you correct your nonconformances and we grant the certificate. We're stating that you have the appropriate food safety plan in place and that you're using the HACCP method and any regulatory requirements that are required as well, and that you are able to effectively manage your food safety system. The auditor's responsibility during the audit. It's his responsibility to verify that your food safety system is effectively implemented and capable of providing safe food, including pet feed and pet food, packaging, retail services, manufacturing, storage and distribution, and primary producers. Okay, during the SQF 8.0, your initial audit, again, you've got to have a desk audit done. That can be done on-site or off-site, depending on whether or not you've got the electronic copy that you can send to the auditor, followed by the facility audit from 30 days to 6 months later. And he will again audit the entire facility, even if you're granted exclusions. Okay, let's delve a little bit into preparing for the audit. So it is your responsibility to audit your internal audit, which we talked about on the second slide, at least annually. So you would take a section of your SQF system and audit a little bit every month, or obviously before your initial audit, you're going to have to speed up that time frame. You're going to want to review your HACCP plan to make sure that it complies with the requirements of the code. You're going to need to understand what's required of the SQF code. Again, that's done by the practitioner. You need to self-assess yourself whether your current processes comply with the SQF requirements. You will modify and improve on current programs to meet the SQF requirements. You're going to document the process, establish records, and train personnel. And that doesn't mean that you have to train every person within your organization on SQF, but they do need to know what their piece of the SQF puzzle is and be trained on that. Okay, the document review is your first step that it officially gets reported in the ReposiTrak system. The doc review is done by the SQF auditor that's got the appropriate module based on what your scope is. He's going to review HACCP documents, process protocols, and risk assessment just to make sure that you've got them all there. You will get nonconformities noted, but those are not counted against you. And again, your facility audit must be conducted within 6 months of that document review. The facility audit is conducted by a registered SQF auditor. He's going to pull the audit form, whether you're doing food safety fundamentals, food safety code, or food safety code and quality, right from the ReposiTrak system. It's going to cover the system elements and appropriate module based on what you do. This is where he's going to look for supporting documents on your HACCP plan, your process protocols, risk assessment. So when you have to do what you say and document it, that's what he's going to be looking for. And you're going to need to have 60 to 90 days of records in order to undergo a facility audit. So some of the SQF requirements that you may not have implemented yet, you're going to need to implement them and start those documents so that he's got enough records to actually audit. You must be producing your products during the audit. So if you manufacture chocolate candy, you need to be manufacturing chocolate candy during the audit. What is your obligation? It is your obligation to request any change in your scope, to request extensions for corrective actions. So if you have a major nonconformity that's maybe a capital improvement project, like there's a crack in a non-food processing area floor, you can still get certified, and it's up to you to request an extension if you can't have that closed out within 30 days. It's up to you whether or not you're going to change CBs. You have the right to go from CB to CB, but falls under you. Your certification body is not going to come to you and say, okay, are you going to stay with us this year? It's all done by contract, but it is your right to notify your current CB if you're changing. It is your obligation to notify certification body and SQF in the event of product recalls. You must also notify your certification body of any regulatory infringements. If you change owners or if you move locations, all of those, it's up to you to let your certification body know, since they're the ones that granted your certification. Okay, what happens if you fail to comply on your initial audit? You must reapply for a new facility audit. If it's within 6 months from the initial facility audit with the same CB, no document audit is required. If you do not comply on your initial audit and you want to change CBs at that point, you must undergo a new document review and facility audit. Okay, let's talk about the surveillance audit. Under 8.0, the audit is scored, and it can raise or lower your score from your previous audit. The purpose, again, is to verify that the SQF system continues to be implemented, confirm continued compliance to the requirements of the code, verify critical steps are under control. It allows you for an opportunity to improve your score. And the audit changes to the supplier's operations and the impact of those changes on your SQF system. So the auditor is going to come in and look at all of that and hopefully raise your score over the initial one so you go back to a 12-month frequency. Under surveillance audit, if you get nonconformities, they still have to be closed out within the 30-day time frame. There is an opportunity for you to get your certificate of registration suspended if you do not have your surveillance audit within that required 6-month time frame. If critical nonconformances are found during the surveillance audit, or if you fail to close out majors or minors within the required time frame of that surveillance audit. So as long as you undergo the audit, you have the surveillance audit in the required time frame, and you don't get new critical nonconformities, you would not get your SQF certificate suspended. But if you fail to do those, the SQF will suspend your SQF certification. The recertification audit is an annual requirement, and it's got to be plus or minus 30 days of your initial audit. As I stated in a previous slide, they're going to verify that the corrective actions are implemented. They're going to look for changes in your operation, that there's still objective evidence of management commitment to the improvement of your SQF system, and that your processes and systems comply with regulatory, customer, and SQF requirements. Okay, the use of guidance documents. So obviously you're going to have to get a copy of the guidance documents for whatever food safety code you fall under. Those are available at the SQF website at www.sqfi.com. There not only are there codes, but there's guidance documents that can assist you in how you're supposed to document and implement the system. If there is conflicting statements between SQF's guidance document and the code prevails every time. So they do really good at keeping up with the guidance documents, but this was a pretty significant change. So if there would be something conflicting between their guidance document and the code that you fall under, the code requirement will stand. Okay, so that wraps up my presentation today. I hope you found it useful. And Maureen, do we have any questions today?
I don't see any. If you have any questions, please email Kim or myself, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. This webinar will also be posted on our website and our YouTube channel here in a few days. So for those who missed out, or if you need to refer back to it, you will be able to refer to this webinar. So thanks so much for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.